The year is 1672. The Dutch Republic, jewel of the Golden Age, a beacon of prosperity built on trade and tolerance, suddenly finds itself teetering on the brink of annihilation. This is the Rampjaar, the disaster year. And at the heart of the storm stands one man. Johan de Witt. Grand Pensionary of Holland, the most powerful statesman in the Republic for nearly 2 decades. Brilliant, calculating, a staunch Republican who governed without a Prince of Orange as stadtholder. He was the architect of Dutch power. And, in the eyes of many, the architect of its downfall. For years, de Witt had skillfully navigated the treacherous waters of European politics, maintaining Dutch dominance through diplomacy and naval strength. He championed the States Party, favoring mercantile interests and provincial autonomy over the centralized, monarchical ambitions associated with the House of Orange. He was respected, even feared. But he also made powerful enemies. Orangist factions simmered, awaiting their chance. Religious hardliners distrusted his perceived pragmatism. And now, disaster struck from all sides. In a stunning coordinated assault, England declared war, followed swiftly by France under Louis XIV, and the German bishoprics of Munster and Cologne. The Republic was invaded, its famed defenses crumbling. Panic gripped the nation. The economy stalled. Fear turned to fury, and the fury needed a target. Who was to blame for this catastrophe? The finger pointed squarely at Johan de Witt and his Republican regime. Had his focus on naval power left the land defenses weak? Had his anti-Orangist policies alienated potential allies and provoked enemies? Amidst the chaos, the call grew louder for the young Prince of Orange, William III, later King William III of England, to be appointed stadtholder, the traditional military leader. De Witt, under immense pressure, eventually conceded. But it wasn't enough to quell the rising tide of hatred, expertly stoked by pamphlets and propaganda accusing him and his brother, Cornelis de Witt, of corruption, treason, and even plotting against the prince. The situation reached a fever pitch when Cornelis de Witt, a respected naval hero and magistrate, was arrested on a dubious charge: conspiring to assassinate Prince William. The accusation came from a barber surgeon named Willem Tichelaar, a man of questionable repute. Despite horrific torture on the rack, Cornelis refused to confess to a crime he likely never conceived. He was ultimately convicted only of perjury related to the investigation and sentenced to exile, stripped of his posts. A lenient sentence, perhaps, but the damage was done. The mob smelled blood. On August 20, 1672, Johan de Witt received word that his brother Cornelis was to be released from the Gevangenpoort, the prison adjacent to the Binnenhof, the center of Dutch government in The Hague. Johan went to the prison to escort his brother home. It was a fatal mistake. Was he naive? Or simply fulfilling a familial duty, blind to the danger swirling outside? As Johan arrived, a crowd began to gather. Fueled by rumor, gin, and orchestrated agitation, it swelled into an enraged mob. Orangist agents were almost certainly present, whipping up the frenzy. Crucially, the civic militia, responsible for maintaining order and guarding the prison, either stood aside or actively sympathized with the rioters. Their inaction remains one of the most debated aspects of the tragedy. Was it incompetence, fear, or tacit approval from higher powers? The mob's fury became unstoppable. They stormed the Gevangenpoort, overwhelming the few guards who resisted. They dragged Cornelis and Johan de Witt from the prison building out onto the street, the Platz. There, in broad daylight, under the shadow of the government buildings where Johan had wielded immense power, the brothers met a gruesome end. They were beaten, stabbed, shot. The violence was frenzied, brutal, almost ritualistic. Once dead, their bodies were stripped naked, strung up upside down on a nearby scaffold, and subjected to horrific mutilation. Fingers, toes, ears, noses were cut off. Internal organs were ripped out. Parts of their bodies were reportedly sold as souvenirs, even, according to some lurid accounts, roasted and eaten by the most fanatical members of the mob. It was an act of political murder transformed into a savage public spectacle. Who truly orchestrated this horror? While the mob's rage was genuine, fueled by the desperation of the Rampjaar, strong evidence suggests careful planning by Orangist supporters. Key figures known to be hostile to the de Witts were seen directing the crowd. Prince William himself was conveniently absent from The Hague, though his supporters were deeply implicated. Did he know? Did he approve? He certainly condemned the act afterward, but he did little to punish the ringleaders, many of whom were later rewarded. Plausible deniability shrouded the prince, but the questions linger. The murder of the de Witt brothers shocked Europe. It marked the brutal end of the first stadtholderless period and cemented William III's rise to absolute power within the Republic. Johan de Witt, the master politician, the symbol of Dutch republicanism, was erased in the most violent way imaginable. Was he a martyr to republican ideals, brought down by circumstance and conspiracy? Or a flawed leader whose policies ultimately failed his country at its moment of greatest need? History rarely offers simple answers. But the savage death of Johan and Cornelis de Witt remains a chilling reminder of how quickly political dissent can explode into mob violence, how fear can be weaponized, and how even the most powerful can fall victim to the dark undercurrents of popular fury and political intrigue. The Rampjaar left an indelible scar on the Dutch soul, and the ghosts of the de Witt brothers still haunt the stones of the Gevangenpoort.